Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I am, of course, your host, as always, Chad. Joining me is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, how the hell are you?
Oh man, always glad to be here.
We're recording this week on a Thursday, so some news have broken since the start of it all. Firstly, what I'll say is if you're living in the southeastern parts of Canada, I hope everyone's being safe. There's apparently a wild ass wildfire raging over there so badly that it's migrated across the Great Lakes and settled neatly on top of us. So all the uh, not steam, smoke is making its way to Ohio, and so we're living underneath a foggy little smoke storm at the moment. Certainly not nearly as bad as what's going on in Canada at the moment. So if you are in Canada, we hope you're being safe. Speaking of Canada, though, TNA lost two more Canadians. Again, I'm forced to ask, what is this company doing? Because Sinner and Saints, Travis Williams, and Judas Icarus are gone. They are gone from TNA. More than likely, they were either on a handshake deal or had their contract reverted to a handshake deal. In which part, that seems to be a lot of why people are leaving. Steve Macklin left because of that. It seems like Danny Luna may have left for that reason. Who is it? Mila Grace, I think, left for that reason. So, the exodus continues. And in 2024, when we started to see a lot of big departures, Rhino famously tweeted out that he'll probably never work for TNA again. It felt like then TNA was cutting the roster. Now it feels like TNA employees are quitting. And that's concerning. How this shakes out for the future is beyond me, but really TNA had four or five tag teams at best, and they weren't using half of them. And now one of the more talented ones, Sinner and Saints, is gone. I don't want to, try to, qualify this as, a big departure on the grand scale of AJ Styles in 2014, because it's not. But you're losing more up and coming prospects. You're losing more guys who could be carrying the division if you just gave them a sense of direction, a purpose, a gimmick. And you couldn't do it. And that's bad. That's very bad. Speaking of which, it seems like Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley are planning on working a few companies. AEW seems to be one of them that they're interested in working with. So the idea of replacing Sinner and Saints with Motor City Machine Guns seems like a pipe dream, making it all the more necessary that TNA keeps talent that they can use long term who are affordable because they can't just keep replacing guys, especially since they're not replacing anyone. They haven't made any moves in any actuality to bring anyone in to replace all the names they've lost. Like who have they brought in so far in 2026? They brought in Ricky Sosa. They brought in Fabian Aichner. They brought in Alana Black. Mm. They brought in Daria Ray. Mm. And I feel like there was like another name that they brought in that is just escaping me at the moment. But none of the moves they've made have moved the needle, and none of the guys they've signed are guys that I think fans truly care about. So I'm interested to see what the future is for this company because right now it's looking pretty bleak. Marcus, what are your thoughts on them losing out on Sinner and Saints?
I think it sucks that they dropped a genuine tag team because that's gonna force them to me. And I also get your take on this as well. I feel like that's gonna force them to try to do things like pair guys like Sosa and Slater together. And while that is an intriguing and I feel great pair, in practicality, those are names who you could very much be putting to better use, I think, on a consistent level in a singles capacity. Um, while you do have genuine tag teams on the roster to your earlier point that were not being used, and in this regard, are gone. Now, am I confusing Center and Saint with the two guys from Order 4?
Yes. Sinner and Saints were in the Northern Armory with Josh Alexander and then Eric Young.
Oh, that's a definite loss because you could be running them against the two guys in order four.
And whenever I play EWR, even though the game's 23 years old, I still play EWR. That's exactly what I do. I book Sinner and Saints against Order 4 in a short term or actually a midterm program to get them both up in terms of notoriety. And it works every time because they're all great workers. But now here we are without two of the better workers in TNA. And I don't know what this company's doing, man. Because they're not even replacing these people with big names or big talent. They're just finding, you know, run of the mill whomevers. It feels like this company's just looking to sign people who are willing to work for the rates they're putting out instead of trying to sign talent who actually are
Yeah,
worthwhile to keep.
you know it's weird. It's like the inverse of what you said about AEW. You said AEW houses like maybe more than feels like 100 some names on the roster, but they only use a healthy rotation of around 40.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like TNA is like we got 100, let's cut most of that to the point where we only have 40 people on the roster to
A
use.
little bit. As far as the
Yeah,
Leon Slater, Ricky Sosa of it all, I like what they're doing.
yeah,
Unfortunately,
same.
I think part of that has to do with the fact that I don't think Leon's going to be here much past October, and I think they're using Leon to give Sosa the rub, which isn't a bad
Mm,
thing. But I think a
yeah,
Sosa Slater tag team, if you could get Sosa for another year, I would put Sosa and Slater in a tag team for the next year. Have them win the tag team belts, call them like the Young Bloods or something, and have them run roughshod over the tag team division and set all sorts of marks. I think that would be the way to go for these guys. And I think it would give Sosa, because I think Sosa, while he has a popular theme and a popular entrance, there's something about him that makes me think, oh, he's not ready for a singles run. And I think if you pair
yeah,
him with Slater, who lacks the natural charisma that Sosa has, I think you'd have a bombastic tag team that covers all bases, that doesn't have any overt holes, and can get you over the hump, so to speak.
yeah.
I think it would be a perfect blend for
But
them both, and I think they could learn from one another because they're both the same
but
age. I think they're both like 22 and 20 or 22 and
yeah,
21.
that's the brilliance of both those signings and hopefully the intent to keep both of them because at this point with everything, all these dominoes dropping, unfortunately and really unnecessarily. Um, that is a great combo that I actually like. When I watched the show the week before last week, I'm like, this is a healthy combination here. But to your point, how much do they cut the legs from under a team like that? And the potential success they have when they cut teams that could be going against them, like Center and Saint.
Well, for me, when I see stuff like this, I lose excitement to a
Yeah,
big degree because a team like Sinner and Saints can work with anyone. And while I think Slater and Sosa are both very talented, I don't think they're Kurt Angle levels of talented where you could put them in the ring with like Slop Bucket Joe and Stevie the One Eyed Wonder and get like a great match out of them. Sosa's very young. And while he's been doing this for a little bit, he hasn't been doing it at the level that he's now at. This is a new
yeah,
experience for him. He's gonna
mm,
him having a pre-show match with Eric Young at Slammiversary is right where I think he should be as far as the development. I think
yeah,
he's young. I think he makes mistakes. He's athletic out the wazoo. He's got so much natural charisma, but he has to build the blocks of being a foundational worker on top of being athletic, on top of being a very charismatic wrestler. And I think when you look at Slater, I think the one thing that's always going to hold him back is he's not that bombastic. He's not that charismatic. But he can work probably with the best of them. I think he's one of the best in ring workers of his lifetime already.
yeah,
And I think you have to realize though that you can have all the talent in the world. Think like Randy Moss when he was a wide receiver for the NFL. super talented receiver, but he didn't have a quarterback, and from like 2002 until 2007, he looked like he was washed up. All of a sudden, he goes to the New England Patriots, gets Tom Brady, and Randy Moss becomes the one receiver to rule them all. He's
Yeah.
dropping 20 plus touchdowns in a season, nearly 2,000 yards. He's God. And I feel like when you're someone like Sosa and you're someone like Slater, you need talent
Yeah.
like Travis
Yeah.
Williams, like Judas Icarus, to help bring you up to that next level. Icarus and Williams aren't on their level as far as talent goes, but they're probably
Yeah.
higher up than most other tag teams in the business. They're very good. You put them together, and you would have had yourself a pretty dynamic feud, if only for a few weeks, because the matches would have been stellar. And I think you can still
Yeah.
get something like that out of Jason Hodge and John Schuyler. And I think you
Yeah.
can get at least the rub of the Hardys. But
Absolutely.
outside of that, like, who do you got left?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think.
I was about to ask you, what do you think? And this could potentially gut what is remaining of the X division. But how much do you think can be gained from pairing Slater and obviously Sosa with, like, say, and he would obviously be the most experienced, would say like a Swan and versus a Swan and a BDE.
I think the tag team would be very interesting if you put them against one another.
Yeah.
But I think Slater's generational as an in-ring worker. Not even just for the athleticism, but for how he understands to build a match. The problem is when you're going into the Slater will still have, and this isn't meant as like a knock on him emotionally, but he's still gonna have some immaturity issues. He's still gonna rush to some spots. He's still gonna have some moments where you're like, you could have done that differently. And I feel like acknowledging that Slater still has, some development needed. To ask Swan to basically help raise the profile of three young men, I think that's
Yeah.
a tall task.
Yeah.
I think if Swan was with Navarro, I think those two could pull up both Slater and Sosa and help give them the
Yeah.
foundation for a better future. But asking
Yeah.
Swan to do that to three dudes, one in BDE, who is significantly behind where Sosa and Slater are. I think
Yeah.
Slater's been doing this for 6 years, 7 years. I think Sosa's 4 or 5, and BDE's only
Yeah.
on year 2. Talent
Yeah.
potential there for BDE, but like I think that's a big ask.
Yeah.
For Slater and
Yeah.
Sosa, I think you want more established tag teams, and I think you want guys in their 30s and 40s to work with them. Because whether Slater's here come
Now,
October or not, he's going to
yeah.
need all the extra rub he can get.
Yeah. Now, if you will, now, obviously, this is asking if you book it and you get the guns back, do you give them that assignment?
Yes, in a heartbeat. Night one.
Yeah.
I'd have Sosa and Slater win the tag team belts from the Hardys, and then once we get through that convoluted, tree of woe, then I'd throw them right in with the machine guns for 3 months. And I would basically tell Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, I want you to run them to the ground. I want you to run them until they're out of breath. Run them until they're forced to stop relying on their speed and quickness. Make them become pro wrestlers, not just super talented athletes. Because that's when you're going to know who Sosa and Slater can be. When you're gasping for air, and you don't have the ability to rest on the outside for 2 minutes, who are you as a competitor? Who are you as a performer? I think that's one of the reasons why the Hardy Boys still work in their 50s as opposed to in their 20s, because they've never been super athletic. They've never been guys who push the speed and pace of a match. They do the occasional big spot, and they're kind of charismatic enough to care about. If we can figure out a way for Slater and Sosa to develop that, where they are able to pick and choose their moments and then also develop the charisma needed to be standouts beyond one another and beyond the company, that's how you find success. And hopefully, if the guns did come in, if we do go with the idea of the Hardys versus Sosa and Slater, you can call them SOS, by the way. I think they would be significantly better off down the road, whether Sosa and Slater stay in TNA long term or not. And that's kind of what I would be booking for, is to make sure that these two young men are the best versions of themselves whenever they decide to leave TNA. So that's my thought.
Agreed. Yep.
Speaking of the best version of themselves by the time they leave, Mike Santana is on his way out, and he's on his way to the WWE. According to WrestleVotes and Fightful Select, they're told that former TNA heavyweight champion is expected to arrive in WWE by the end of the summer. No word yet on when that is expected to be. This isn't that surprising considering he doesn't seem to have any real interest in going to Japan. In fact, most American wrestlers don't have a desire to go to Japan long term because the money's not there right now. They're going through a massive financial crisis. The yen is next to nothing in terms of its value, and wrestlers are not being paid what they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's one of the reasons why New Japan got sold, and it's one of the reasons why the Japanese wrestling scene, as of right now, seems a bit hollow and like they're not really sure what tomorrow looks like. So yeah, Santana was always going to the WWE if he didn't resign with TNA because AEW is absolutely not an option for him, not with the way they used him and not with the way they left. Marcus, you think in WWE or NXT by the this time, say come September?
Either or. It would be cool if he went to straight to the main roster, but because he would not be as well known by main roster WWE fans proper, because to your point, they are very use the word all the time. I'm about to say fetishy, but they are very
Fickle.
fed minded.
Oh, fetishists.
Yeah, fetishists and solely, tied in to WWE, but not really any place else unless it's forced upon them. Probably go be NXT because that's the audience that they familiarized him with. And oftentimes that can kind of feel like a completely different verse from the main roster. Just that particular, just NXT audience in general. So probably go to NXT. Probably go to NXT. I'll be pleasantly surprised if he goes to the main roster. But even saying that, that doesn't mean he's going to resonate. His talent is undeniable, but how many times do we say that about everybody else, and they kind of just there? I mean, look at Gable versus somebody like Gable, where he's at, where he was versus where he should be. Look what he had to get back to at this point, and look what it took. So, yeah, good luck to him.
I think good luck to him is going to be a significant understatement, mostly because when you look at guys who have left TNA to go to the WWE, it's just not good. There's like a
Yeah,
whole track record of people failing to find the same level of success. And now you have this whole situation where guys like Santana have to essentially remake themselves in the image of the
mm-hmm.
WWE so that they can be accepted by the WWE.
Yeah,
And it just
yeah,
hasn't worked. Like, how many TNA guys have gone to the WWE and found success in the last 3 or 4 years? I downright say none of them. I'm not going to sit here and count Cody because I think Cody's time here was a hiccup, and I mean that quite literally. He was gone that quickly.
yeah, yeah,
But I think when you look at like Jordan Grace, you look at Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry had a decent run in NXT, but no one talked about it. He was booked well, but I don't think his moments mattered. I don't think his matches were getting people excited. And when you don't have anyone who can elevate Hendry into having good matches, I think you lose a little bit of the conversational aspect of what makes a star a star. So I don't
yeah.
think he's been used badly, but he hasn't been used at his best. They haven't set him up for success. And
I
if
mean,
Hendry's not going straight to the main roster, I don't see Santana going to the main roster because I think Santana's a better worker than Joe Hendry. But that's like
yeah,
that's like saying he's a great point guard who can score. Well, every point guard can score in the NBA these days. They don't play defense. That's not the
yeah.
defining quality anymore of a star. And I don't think
You're right.
Santana had the charisma of Hendry. And now here we
Yeah,
are asking how Santana is going to find success on the next level when guys who have the attributes needed to find success at this level aren't finding success.
Yeah, man, and they like to get to your point about the rotation. They have their own rotation mostly, which is filled with Samoans at this point. And they like to just rinse, wash, and repeat. So, you got a few buzzing names like also they serious about guys like Javon to a point more so probably somebody like Oba, Trick Williams obviously. Um, but Julia is one of the best in the world. You never know it. Jordan Grace, same deal. Never know it. Um, Ethan Page is on there, but that's only gonna that doesn't feel like it's gonna jet rocket anywhere. Same thing with Ricky Saint. So and then they just brought back Corbin. Apparently they go about to bring in Kaz and Enzo and somebody like Hendry. When you give them even a taste of something like a gimmick to run in the ground, like say his name and he appears and they could just pop you up on screen for a laugh and a quick physicality segment, run that into the ground before they ever put you in anything serious.
Mm-hmm.
So it's they prove that time and time again. So I said it just yeah, it's like you literally feel like you'll be fighting for last place, and I feel like on a talent level, I mean you put him in NXT, he blowing past all them dudes on a talent level. So it's just one of them things. You never know. It could go really well, but you just never know. Like you said to your point, that the problem is they want you to remake yourself all over again. Probably give you a generic theme song, which a lot of people share at this point, and it's basically there for the brand name at that point.
Yep. That and a paycheck.
Yeah,
Speaking of paychecks, the Dark Side of the Ring folks probably got a nice one for doing their bid on TNA. I watched the first two episodes. I don't have Vice TV at home, but I do have it at work.
yeah, all three on YouTube now, man.
All three are on YouTube.
Yeah, all
Well, there
three
you go.
parts.
I may still wait to watch it on Saturday when I get to work or Sunday. That
Yeah,
way,
pass some time. Yeah,
well, and also I know they don't track television metrics by just who tunes it on. They have to
yeah,
have that stupid fucking box and what have you. But I'd still rather watch it on Vice TV if it matters at all, just so they
got you.
can get that number.
Yeah,
The first two, I think, so far were accurate but not honest, if that makes a lot of sense. They factually told you what happened, but especially with like the whole Karen Jarrett. Karen Jarrett is such a bitter woman. Such a bitter and self-obsessed. I know why Kurt and her fell apart. Like Jesus Christ. But she tried to really imply that her and Jeff didn't have an affair. Like she even said, "Well, we didn't have an affair." But at no point did she ever say that they were divorced. That her and Kurt were divorced. Like, well, we were together in name only. Were you still married? Did you file for divorce? We were legally separated, but you were still staying with Kurt whenever you guys did TNA tapings. So there was a lot of stuff that they omitted, and they really tried to make it seem like Dixie Carter was so vengeful against Jeff Jarrett. And I don't know why people are just blindly accepting Karen Jarrett's word, but she's the least respected person in this whole docuseries. She's the person with the least amount of credibility. And oh, by the by, we were all here for it. So like, what are you fucking talking about? I'll tell y'all what we knew at the time and what was omitted from the broadcast as to why Jeff Jarrett got kicked out of TNA and why he lost his leadership spot. It wasn't because Dixie was looking for a reason to get rid of Jeff. The reports were, and Kurt was spiraling hard at this time. When Kurt found out that Jeff Jarrett was fucking his wife, whether they were ready to end the marriage or not, they were still legally married. Kurt threatened to quit TNA. Kurt's never denied this. The story was out there for years. It's not something that was shocking to anyone to hear. Kurt and Jeff did not like each other at this point. Jeff had brought Kurt in essentially to hand over the reins. Jeff didn't feel a certain way about Kurt, and Kurt felt that Jeff was fucking with him at times. And it got to a point when Jeff and Karen started to get together. They can sit here and tell you, well, everyone knew. No, not everyone knew. Dixie didn't know. A lot of people within Dixie's company didn't know. And Kurt didn't know. Because when Kurt found out, he threatened to quit. And say whatever you will about Jeff Jarrett. I'm a big proponent of Jeff Jarrett, not just for his time in TNA, but historically in wrestling. I've been a fan of Jarrett for a long time. Maybe only 2000 being the only year I didn't like him. And that was mostly down to booking, and I didn't really like anyone in WCW in 2000 because Vince Russo is a terrible fucking booker. The problem that, was completely glossed over was that it came down to who were you going to keep? The star of your show, Kurt Angle, or the guy who's been off and on television for the last 2 years, who even when he was at the top wasn't the draw and wasn't the star that Kurt was. Who are you going to keep? You're going to keep Kurt. Yep, you're paying him 7 figures a year. You're going to keep Kurt. And I did like that Jeff tried to showcase himself as the one who, well, I talked to Bob Carter and I'm the reason that I got Kurt hired and what have you. Because I can't believe Bob Carter would sit there and be like, sell me on Kurt Angle. He's the biggest free agent not named Hulk Hogan in the history of pro wrestling. That's how I'm selling you on Kurt. You sign him, we're better. And he's worth every dollar you give him. And he was. For 10 years, Kurt Angle was fan-fucking-tastic in TNA. Even when his body broke down, still fantastic. But this wasn't some type of, motivated bullshit to get Kurt out of the company because Dixie was jealous, because Karen's a fucking psychopath. No. Dixie fired Jarrett, excuse me. Dixie fired Jarrett because she was trying to keep Kurt. That's what was reported at the time. That's what has been corroborated since. And the only people saying anything different is Karen Jarrett. Karen Jarrett, by the by, once tried to get into a fight with Braun Strowman at a bar because Braun Strowman didn't know who she was. And she got lippy and mouthy and tried to put him in his place. Now, at the time, I thought Braun Strowman was out of line, but also Karen Jarrett is just a notch below Rebby Hardy when it comes to, people in wrestling that no one really respects. And there's a reason for that. Their behavior is a reason for that. Karen Jarrett was a hell of a character on TNA television for a long time, but no one else wanted to sign her and put her on TV. Why? Because no one likes her. She's a hard person to like. And a big reason why is because of the behavior and attitude you saw in this docuseries where she was just vengeful and spiteful and just running her mouth for the sake of hearing herself talk. I think Jarrett really does believe he got screwed, but also, again, I love Jeff Jarrett. He gave us one of our biggest breaks. Jarrett, however, was not just, 10 years ago involved in a Ponzi scheme. He was actually trying to sell gold bars to fund, the Global Force Wrestling endeavor. And everyone saw that it's not a Ponzi scheme, excuse me, it was a pyramid scheme. And everyone called it out for being a pyramid scheme. And it was. And so when I'm watching this docuseries, and I'm seeing all the people who would have an issue with Dixie Carter coming out and having an issue with Dixie Carter, and then people holding up their opinions like they're the definitive opinions, I sit here and go, no, there's so much you're not saying here, and so much you're not talking about. And I feel like you're being disingenuous. Now, that's specifically about firing Jeff Jarrett and moving on. Dixie brought in Hulk Hogan, and that was bad. That we said that in 2010, that was bad. We sit here 16 years later and say that was bad. It was bad. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is that she brought in Hulk Hogan to replace Jeff Jarrett. And he can sit and be like, well, I was hired to then go and try to recruit Hulk Hogan. Well, she removed Jeff Jarrett from a position of power, not from the company. So he still had a job to do. And Jeff and Hogan had a bit of a relationship, so it made sense to send him. I don't think that's the big gotcha moment of the docuseries. And also the other part that really kind of made me chuckle was hearing Awesome Kong talk about how low the knockouts pay were. And that's not something to dispute. The knockouts were not paid well, especially the new ones, the OG ones, I should say. You know, Roxy Laveau, ODB, all of them, they were dramatically underpaid. I don't even think Gail Kim was making six figures. But they're talking about this like it's some big revelation when we knew it was happening in the moment. Like 2008, 2009, we were hearing about how unhappy the knockouts were with their low pay. Like this wasn't a new thing. And the way they kind of like reveal it and they're like, "Oh my god, can you believe TNA did?" Yeah, because we already knew. That's like someone in 2027 doing like a Jeffrey Dahmer story and talking about all the terrible things and acting like it's some kind of big revelation. Did you know Jeffrey Dahmer killed a bunch of people? No one's ever told you that before. No, no, they did. We were all paying attention the first 30 times around. So it felt very much like a story that has already been told, much ado about nothing, and that's a little bit disappointing. Nothing in this documentary was new information. Now, it may have been new information for people who are newer to the scene. Like if you've only been a wrestling fan for the last 4 or 5 years, yeah, this is probably new information. But if you've been long enough around the block, if you've been watching wrestling since the start of the Dark Side of the Ring of it all, you knew all this already. This wasn't news. Now I haven't seen the third episode yet, and I'm very curious to see how that one goes. But so far, I have not learned anything new about this, and I've seen a lot of bullshitters bullshit their way into making people look worse than they were or better than they weren't. So like, I'm intrigued about episode three. Marcus, what are your thoughts so far on this?
First of all, Wrestling Underground fans always have always and will continue to look to Chad as my TNA encyclopedia.
I
that's
just pay
just
attention.
what it is. Yeah, that's just what it is. So I was very much intrigued not only to watch this and maybe tune into some stuff that I may have not um particularly privy to just because of the individual that was talking. But for the most part, we lived through this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to the point where we was covering uh a lot of it, particularly I mean that little instance with uh Jarrett, Karen and Strowman. I remember specifically we talked about, but Chad and I we unfortunately lived through a lot of this stuff, and because it was done so haphazardly, um, to Chad's point, a lot of stuff we knew because it was just so. I mean, it was bungled at every possible point. When Hogan came in, everything about TNA that had gave it an identity he loathed and immediately wanted to change into something that was stupid and ultimately made no sense to their people ended up going back on anyway. Um, and all the other stuff was pretty much. I mean, the stuff with Karen and Karen. By the way, when you said you want to know the real reason behind Kurt and Karen falling out, I was honestly selfishly looking for Rocker Khan to be said, but that's the going gag on this show anyway. But yeah, I mean that's unfortunate. Particularly Jeff was obviously going through a lot of the time, and Kurt was going through a lot as well. Like I mean, we could have lost him. We already talked about like he told Vince like if you don't fire me, I'm not gonna make it. And then he get to TNA, and he came to TNA with a pill problem. Because I think this was on one of his probably his last WWE document. He talked about like he came to TNA already having a pill problem. And then because they always did parties, which I guess they referenced on the show after the tapings, he ended up having a drink, developing a drinking problem. So the drinking on top, the booze on top of the pills, and it was just I don't know how he made it um, in the way that he did. Obviously, by the grace of God, he did, but that's insane. The knockout pay, I'm really surprised. I think Miss Kong on the show, she's never been really one to hold back. So hearing her talk about it was interesting a little bit. Um, But it is interesting to see just how much the narrative of Dixie just came in and kind of just threw a monkey wrench in everything to the point where jumping in on the creative meetings, cutting Jared out, telling Scott Demore don't call him boss, and this, that, and the third. And because to your earlier point, that she's not here to defend or talk about any of these points, um, it's kind of going to get skewed that way. The narrative around her was she was a great lady, great, kind, and good energy type lady, but was like a absolute mark when it came to, for lack of better phrasing, for being a novice to the business, and because a lot of people just innately do that, took advantage of that. So, but like you said, because we really not gonna get her side of the story in this particular instance anyway, it's gonna kind of just gonna be kind of left out there, as her being a bad guy. And I don't know how much. I gotta finish the second part. I don't know how much bad mouthing they did to Hogan because this was done before or after his death in terms of being recorded.
I think probably before, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, a lot of the stuff we like I said, the stuff was done so haphazardly, particularly during that time when every week it was a TNA, it was a story about TNA about backstage morale. So a lot of this stuff was they didn't keep stuff in house good enough to hide none of this stuff. So a lot of this stuff is just it's really just kind of just to spotlight Jarrett in three parts and just how like they say intertwined it is, and it was eerie listening to the first half of the show. You talked about it, like the underlying like subtitle of the thing kind of feels like TNA being the story, like they said, of a bunch of what ifs.
Hmm.
And I feel like every week we talk about TNA and all these firings or willful releases because people are asking for them. This is another stage of TNA where it's like a bunch of what ifs as well. Like what could have happened if you retained all these names, if you made these people champions, if you didn't do this weird business decision, and it's like it's kind of it's this weird cycle that the company just continues to kind of be in no matter what era it's in. It's weird.
It is. And Jarrett's history in TNA is always going to be a complicated one because a lot of the conversation around Dark Side of the Ring was how Dixie prohibited Jarrett from allowing TNA to reach its full, birth of what it could have been. But in actuality, Jeff was the main instrument of this whole thing for, what, 5, 6 years, 7 years, 7 years. And he still only got them to a point where they can pull in like a 1.3 on the ratings when WWE was doing like a 3.8, 4.0. And also when they were touring, they were pulling in 2,200 people. Like this was not a company that was running the best it could be. They were booking a lot of stupid shit. And Jeff was defaulting to the wrong people more often than not. In fact, the story of TNA, it should be about how people were loyal to the wrong people for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff was loyal to his father and Vince Russo when he shouldn't have been loyal to either of them. They were both terrible at their fucking jobs. This idea that Jerry Jarrett was this great fucking booker is a goddamn fucking travesty and a calamity and full of shit because he never fucking did anything as a booker. None of his companies ever reached national level. He was in line to take over the booking job in, what was it, 92 when Vince McMahon was looking at prison time, but they didn't give it to him then. And Jeff didn't think his dad knew what the fuck he was doing 10 years later because Jeff still defaulted to Vince Russo in 2002 and Ed Ferrara. And for, 4 or 5 years, Jeff defaulted to Vince Russo from 2002 to about, mid to 2005. He defaulted to Vince Russo. It was until Dusty took over after Vince went and found Jesus and then came back in 2007. And honestly, from Dusty's takeover to the end of 2006 was the best 2 years of TNA. But Jeff brought back Russo,
Yeah.
and we ignore that. Like all the shit that we hated from 2007 to 2009 was because of Vince Russo, was because of Jeff Jarrett. And Jeff had his own demons at this time. Now, much like Kurt with his broken neck and the pain of it all, not unfounded and
Yeah.
not something that we don't understand. Jeff lost the love of his life. His wife died painfully and slowly in front of him. That is not something to take lightly. That is not something that you can just go, well, just get over it. No, that's devastating, especially if you're the one caretaking for her and
Yeah.
you can't help her. That's fucking devastating. I don't I'm not surprised he developed a drinking problem. But that drinking problem didn't go away. It lingered for a good 9 years. Because, guys, fun factoid, Jeff was brought back in charge of TNA in not just 2014 when he quit, but also in 2016 and 2017 when he got fired for being drunk on the job. He went down to, what was it, AAA, and was seen basically being out of, he wasn't sober, is
Yeah,
the
out of
story.
sorts. Yeah.
Out of sorts. He was he was far from straight. And he came back and there was conversations and there was talks about him being sent home, getting help, and then boom, overnight he's fired. That's why Scott D'Amore and Don Callis were brought in. Anthem was scrambling for Jeff Jarrett's replacement,
Yeah.
and so they gave the job to both D'Amore and Callis. And then Callis, he went and had a bit of was caught with a little bit of scarlet on his face, so to speak, and he quietly left the company. No one ever talks about why, but we can all put two and two together. And this whole sequence of events only happens because Jeff Jarrett is still not in control of his life and is still unfit to run a wrestling company some 9 years later. So this idea that Jarrett got screwed over by Dixie is a fallacy. Jarrett screwed Jarrett. Jarrett let his personal life get in the way. Jarrett let the fact that he was sleeping with his top star's wife and or ex-wife, which whether it's a wife or an ex-wife, you don't do that.
Yeah.
If I run a company and I desperately need, my agent A to make all the money that he makes to make us profitable, and I go and strip his wife, yeah, fire me.
Yeah. It's one of them unspoken rule type of deals. Even though the business is littered, unfortunately, with a lot of those stories, most of which were covered on Dark Side of the Ring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. I mean, like I said, I got to finish the second half, but I mean, I would imagine that rubs the bulls the wrong way. Encourages somebody who's deeply respected profoundly, and Jared was as well, but that kills a lot of the morale, and then it gets mixed up because she was brought in at one point to kind of be Kurt's handler, and then that fell through because she got tired, and then that I don't know where Kurt was in his journey of struggle, if you will, when that all happened. But also, I would imagine that didn't help anything either. Um, so it really was just like a calamity of events, and I'm glad you brought up that Don Callis, the moral situation, because I think people like the company just took you through so much, so many regime changes. Like they talk about it like with Warner Brothers over the DC thing, but TNA kind of set the standard, got their own standard for it. In the middle of this, as you're talking, I'm like, okay, when was the Dutch Mantel thing? When did that? What particular period? Z came in for a cup of coffee too.
So Dutch Mantel was actually part of the backstage crew for a few years. I want to say
Yeah,
2005, 2006, and he was fired in 2009. The problem is in 2009, and this was not addressed in the docuseries that I've seen. Again, I haven't seen part three, but 2009 was one of the most chaotic years for TNA behind the scenes. So I was able to find some evidence. ProWrestling.net, July 20th, 2009. Jeff Jarrett sent home from TV. All of his angles are dropped, and they move on from everything he was doing because he's about to get ousted. A month later, August 15th, Kurt Angle gets arrested for allegedly stalking Raka Khan. Like, brother, we're talking less than 31 days. Less than 31 days, and your former VP gets fired, or your former president gets fired, and your top star gets arrested. That's the kind of nonsense that was going on in TNA in 2009. And all Vince Russo's booking the show. And now there's conversations with Hulk Hogan coming in. I get why Dixie Carter pivoted to Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff when she did, because by that conversation, from what I understand, started in sometime in 2000, September 2009. In the last 2 months, her most reliable assets have proven to be less than reliable. She needed someone who can come in, right the ship, and get things sorted. And let me see something. Dixie Carter. What was it? Pre-show meeting. It was like 2009, if I remember. 2007? Oh, it was 2007. I thought that was in 2009. 2007 was another strange year for TNA. Regardless, though, these were all under Jeff Jarrett's fucking tenure as head of the company. And again, I love Jeff Jarrett. I respect Jeff Jarrett. I like Jeff Jarrett. And Jeff Jarrett's responsible for ensuring that my wrestling fandom didn't fall away after the death of WCW. That does not mean that this was a accurate conversation that was being had on Dark Side of the Ring. It felt like they passed too much off onto Dixie Carter, even though Jeff was leading the company from 2002 to 2009, and Dixie was more or less a figurehead. And one of the things that I wish they would have gotten right was how chaotic Jeff Jarrett was as a boss, both from 2002 to 2009, and again in 2013 to 2014, and then again in 2016, 2017. And here's the sad thing: I still think, even with all this being announced, I still think he's an improvement if he and Demore were to buy TNA today over what we've been getting. So just because he's chaotic doesn't make him bad. Like TNA found a lot of growth, and they were very successful with him in charge. The problem is that he became unreliable. He became unprofessional, and Dixie panicked. That's the reality of the situation. So
Yeah, and she did do stuff. I mean, obviously money played a part in it, but she had a lot to do with why Sting was there as long as he was, because he was. How many times was he would reportedly trying to retire or leave the company, and she kind of kept convincing him like that was a whole thing.
well, she did that with Sting almost every year from 2006 to 2015, 2014.
Yeah,
Every year she would convince Sting to come back for one more year.
yeah,
So speaking of retirement, Sammy Callahan's not being quiet in retirement. He is doing the work, they say. According to Cody Haynes of Body Slam, Sammy Callahan has been working backstage for AEW over the last three tapings in Clearwater, Florida, Roanoke, Virginia, and last night in Boston, Massachusetts. Sources have also confirmed that Callahan will be at tonight's AEW tapings. This is obviously yesterday. Additionally, it was noted that Callahan has seemingly been working as a backstage producer. The report adds that AEW sources said that it doesn't seem like he has a contract yet, which isn't uncommon. Usually, when guys, even in TNA and WWE, when guys are trying out for a producer role, they'll get brought in to do a few weeks of paid but uncontracted work to see if they can do the job. So it sounds like this is a tryout for Callahan as a backstage producer, and it sounds like he's doing very well. We've all pretty much said the same thing, that we hoped that TNA would hand the book over to Callahan because he's proven to be a good booker. He's proven to be a good head of talent. He develops guys quite well. He had a big hand in a lot of his big TNA feuds with the Lucha Brothers, with Tessa Blanchard, with LAX. Callahan, Brian Cage was Callahan was a big driving creative force in all those feuds. And I don't know why TNA didn't go with him. Now, the weekly television show has improved since Dreamer's been gone. I dare say though that it might have been even better if they had handed the book to Callahan though. Does the idea of Callahan ending up in a backstage role make you feel any sort of way, Marcus? Looks like we temporarily lost Marcus for the moment. Until we get Marcus back, we will move on. OVW will have a show on TNA Plus. It's called Independence Rage. It will be airing for free, and it will be on July 19th, this coming Sunday. And on the show itself, what do we have? They didn't announce any of the actual matches. So let's pull this up then. OVW Independence Rage. Okay. So according to Cage Match, we have 3 matches. Kevin Thorne will take on Cal Hero. Tony Evans, who's the OVW US champion, will take on Kid Colossus. And the OVW heavyweight champion, Jay De Niro, will take on Dustin Jackson. Not exactly who's who so far, but the Kevin Thorne Cal Hero match has me interested because, love me some Cal Hero. So not Cal Hero, Kevin Thorne. So that'll be interesting to see what they do there. That'll be this weekend. This kind of goes hand in hand with the conversations that have been going around about OVW and TNA developing a working relationship for OVW to handle TNA's developmental territory. That all but seems guaranteed at this point, with them now airing a show live on their service. Big happenings for OVW, and hopefully we get some developed talent out of this. Because even though I don't know if OVW has any talent on their roster that I would say are worth being on TNA television, I'd rather the most doldrums of OVW talent getting TNA airtime over NXT talent. So I'm on board with that idea. MLP, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, had their debut show on TSN this past week. I think it was actually just Wednesday at midnight, apparently. On their debut show, Scott D'Amore opened up the show talking about wrestling in Canada. We then got the interim Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling Championship. Stu Grayson defended it against Jonathan Gresham. We got a video package for who looks like to be the top guys of the company. Giselle Shaw, former TNA talent. Although in this review it says Giselle Shaw, so that's hilarious. Psycho Mike, who's known for his body slams, if I remember correctly. And then a tag team of Sheldon Jean and Brent Bank. Sheldon Jean did a bit of a tag team run with Kenny King for a little bit, so that could be a fun little tag team there because I'm familiar with both dudes. Rhino defeated Gama Singh Jr. Stu Grayson got a promo. Then we had the grizzled young veterans of James Drake and Zach Gibson taking on Jesse Bieber and Johnny DeLuca. Jesse Bieber I really liked. He was on the Border Brawl show last year that aired on Zonify, so he was pretty impressive there. Uh, Giselle Shaw took on Alice Crowley and defeated her to retain the women's championship. And then Rohan Raja attacks Stu Grayson, setting up what I have to assume is a new feud for them. So we should be seeing some fun stuff out of there eventually. Lockdown is coming up August 23rd, 2026. No matches have been announced. I'm hoping we go back to how it was 20 years ago. Actually, 21 years ago, 2005, where we had steel cage table matches, steel cage ladder matches, steel cage first blood matches, steel cage falls count anywhere matches, the fun stuff. And I think if you do that with a lockdown event, you'll remember why this event was so beloved by so many people. They got the great Left for Dead, Dead Island. What was it? It was I think it was Left for Dead. Kind of poster. That was a cool little look that they got going on with Jeff Hardy's hand. Right now, I don't know what the main event's going to be. Nick Nemeth is kind of feuding with Casey Navarro, but I can't imagine that they're going to go and do Nemeth versus Navarro. Nor do I know what the Lethal Lockdown match is going to be, or if they're even going to have one. But Lethal Lockdown's been a staple of this pay-per-view for decades at this point. So I would have to imagine if you're doing Lockdown, you're doing Lethal Lockdown. So we'll see what happens there. But the good news about this is, according to Wrestle Tickets or whatever the fuck they're called, they're doing quite well with ticket sales as opposed to their last event. Let me see here real quick. I had it here somewhere. According to Ticketmaster, they have unleashed more. They've opened up. There we go. Excuse me. They opened up more seats for the event. It looks like they added one, two, three, four, five, six sections. So they'll probably be able to do pretty well. They're in the Credit One Union Arena, which can hold about, where is it? 10,000, 9,500 for wrestling and boxing. If they can pull in 4,500, I think that would be a good number for this venue. If they get anywhere over five, I think they're having a great night. Hopefully that's what they can do, but they're going to need to start announcing show matches for it because we're a little more than 5, 6 weeks away. So I think now is the time to start building up to the matches for it. So hopefully we get some answers there. Um, Marcus, you back yet? Welcome back, Marcus. Uh, I had a question for you. I don't remember what it
Hmm.
is now. Give me a second. Let me reopen these tabs real quick. Here we go. Nope. One more. There we go. Sammy Callahan possibly working in AEW. How do you feel about that?
I mean, look, if TNA didn't want him, didn't find his services worthy of their time, you got to go where you appreciate it and not tolerate it. I didn't even know the extent to which he was working as broadly as he was behind TNA. But when I found out, I was vastly disappointed, particularly in the fact that he was working very prominently in the merch department and very much aiding in the increase in the sales of that merch, which has never really been something that I think we've ever reported on in terms of the merch moving in a fantastic direction. I think maybe that was a thing at one time when Don West was Don Westic of it all, but with Sam McCallum being as creative he is and helping with T-shirt design, which has always been, I think, a weak point in there in some of that merch. On top of the other stuff he was doing as a potential producer and whatnot, as we talked about before, even before we got that information, that was probably a perfect role for him with his diminished in-ring work. So yeah, but like I said, I mean, you have other people, will say on X, like if you got three people doing the same job, you don't need all three. I'm like, no, he was one person doing three jobs, or maybe probably more than that. So I don't know what the full fallout of that was before in terms of watching, work for AEW. One man's trash, one man's treasure. So I don't blame him. He still obviously has a great love for the business and wants to work, and if he got a space to do it, unfortunately, as a TNA fan, that's TNA's loss.
Agreed. OVW is doing a show this weekend that's going to air on TNA Plus. Any interest in watching OVW's next show, Independence Rage?
Yeah, because I'm interested in seeing what the talent pool is like in there. Like I watch NXT mostly semi consistently because it comes on TV. They got a weird roster of talent that is just it. Like it was interesting trying to get used to the whole NXT 2.0 and what that was, but that has some good stuff come out of it more often than not for me anyway. But this particular generation is just I don't know where it's going. So I'm looking forward to seeing what OEW has to offer. Obviously, I think a lot of times people say OEW and they're immediately associated with that like almost once in a lifetime class. Who was it? Randy, Brock, Cena, Orton, uh, Benjamin,
So yeah, it
and
was.
yeah,
The, I don't think they were all in there at the same time, but the
yeah,
core group that we always talk about were Shelton Benjamin, Charlie Haas, John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista, Brock Lesnar, and then maybe one or two guys at the tail end. And
yeah,
that was like an iconic class. And
yeah.
and I shouldn't say funny. The saddest part of them all was the best wrestler in that whole group wasn't any of them. It was Charlie Haas's brother Russ Haas, who ended up
Mm.
passing away before either of them could be called up. And it was
Wow,
actually,
RP.
yeah, it was actually going to be Russ Haas, Charlie Haas, and Shelton Benjamin and Brock Lesnar, who were all called up together as a tag team, as like two different tag teams. Because Benjamin and Lesnar were both from Minnesota together. I think Shelton was a player coach for Lesnar in Lesnar's senior year. 'Cause I think Shelton's a year older than Brock or 2 years older than Brock. So they were a tag team called the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. And at the same time, Russ and Charlie Haas were the Russ brothers, or I'm sorry, the Haas brothers. And both of them were viewed as the next big tag teams. And then when Russ passed away, they reshuffled things. And I forget who it was. It may have been Paul Heyman. Spoke very highly about Brock being a solo star. So they paired Shelton with Charlie because Charlie needed a new gimmick. And that's how you got the world's greatest tag team. And that's how you got Brock Lesnar heading up to the main roster as a solo star. So things could have been radically very different if Russ Haas never passes away. Wild 2001 2002 class of OVW talent. They do
Yeah.
have some interesting people. I watched their 1400 episode, and they got some real interesting people. JBL wrestled on that show.
Oh, that's the show you was talking about.
Mm-hmm. That happened about 3 4 weeks ago. They got some good guys. Um, I wouldn't say any of them are ready to be strapped a rocket to, but OVW has been producing a lot of guys that end up going on to AEW. Now, granted, like the one tag team with Turbo Floyd and Truth Magnum, I forget what their name is off the top of my head. They're, I think, Ring of Honor six-man tag team champions or Ring of Honor tag team champions right now. They got all this charisma and they got a great look. They were OVW. A few other guys who have been called up from OVW have gone on to AEW as well. So like they're still producing guys. I don't think they have anyone at the moment besides maybe Jessica Rodan who is giving people a lot of excitement. She's going to be on the next season of the American Gladiator show, and if TNA can convince her to sign, they'll get a fucking tailor-made, easy to promote superstar of a female athlete. But TNA is not really good at recruiting talent right now, so we'll see what happens there. The other thing that's happened, Marcus, Major League Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling debuted their debut show on TSN. I haven't watched it. I just read the results. Are you going to try to hunt down MLP and their new TV show?
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it or coordinate with you if you find it and see what's happening. Cause yeah, Maple Leaf has put on some quality shows. I commend Todd Moore. Really picking up his ball and kind of running with it in his own way. And we've kind of been talking about him since they first started doing big shows. And he's been trying to gradually grow that every chance he gets. So looking forward to seeing what they produce there because he is somebody who is able to has a good name and has the ability to bring in a lot of quality talent for those shows. So
Very talented. We'll see what happens. Lastly, Marcus, lockdown's happening in about 5 weeks. How are you feeling about the event heading in?
I like the fact that apparently tickets are moving. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's good because that's I feel like sometimes a lot of that stuff comes down to the wire for TNA for whatever final reason. So I'm glad to hear tickets are moving. And much to your point, uh, I was did click back in by the time that you were talking about it. Much like you, I would like to see them kind of if you go get back to it as it was, like the different versions of the lockdown concept. If you're bringing this concept back after how many years, kind of just celebrate what made it special in the first place. And even with the diverse roster that they have feuds and little stories that they could tell that will warrant a lot of those scenarios and make them fun. If you're going to run, I know this is going to give Chad Deuce chills. If you're going to run um, Ming Lee and John Brooks style again, give it another stipulation for a finality match. So then you got other stuff. I think that would also be a good way to do something with the X division as well. So it's to your point, like they bring some. If you don't bring back all of them and stack the deck with all different type of stipulation match, at least do two or three and spread it out good. Don't do all three of those things back to back to back.
So I don't know if we can find the show in its entirety, but MLP's Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling's YouTube channel does have moments of the show. Stu Grayson's title defense, Giselle's title defense, Grizzly Young Vets, and Rhino, and the ending segment all up on their YouTube channel in small segments. So we have at least that if we can't watch the whole
Gotcha.
show. Looks like
Gotcha.
they're only getting a few thousand for some of their videos currently. Marcus, you wanted to talk about one final thing before we call it a night. Former TNA wrestler Mahabali Shera got to do the one thing we all wanted to do over the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, he this was because this is obviously Power Slap, who's what this is Dana's promotion, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, aside from that, I just thought I just will call this like the wrestling underground kind of moment of the week because I saw I saw Jack Swagger get slapped and knocked out, which was interesting enough. But when I saw the camera go on the person who did it, I was like, "You gotta be kidding me!" Mahabali Shera, TNA's own Mahabali Shera, literally slapping Jack Swagger into another dimension. It looked like. So I just thought that was interesting. I was gonna put it as the moment of the week. I implore people to go check it out because it is both hilarious and ironic at the same time.
Jack is an insufferable human being, and Mahabali slapping the shit out of him makes me a very happy boy. Jack, whatever you want to call him, Jake Hager, was having a nice run in Bellator and was undefeated. I think he's actually still undefeated in MMA, but he's not fighting anymore. And I wonder if maybe he'll consider going back into MMA with either one championship or what the hell is it called? Oh, I can't think of it now. GFL? What is it called?
Mm.
Can't remember it now. PFL. PFL. That's what it is. The PFL.
Yeah,
And enter their heavyweight division. See if he can make any noise there because the power slap game ain't going his way.
yeah, I don't, yeah,
Just,
I don't even know usually how that goes. Do you get just to keep coming back, or if you get knocked out, you kind of just got to climb the ranks again? I don't know how that works,
it,
but
there's really no ranks. This
yeah,
is just people dumb enough to. They're getting paid a couple $100 to slap the shit out of each other, and I gotta say, the money's not worth it, and the brain trauma is real. So like, this is only going to
looks,
further affect um, Jake Hager's brain capacity going forward.
yeah. I mean, just in this shot that's paused in the video, the slap, Shira Shira's hand looks cartoonishly big. I don't want
Yeah.
it's flagging for it is not good. But yeah, that was try to look for some stuff throughout the week, kind of give us a little moment of the week. Um, every week has a little fun show in there. But yeah, go check that out. It's a little palate cleanse on the sycophant timeline that tends to be these wrestling debates.
I would find it interesting though if maybe this doesn't get Hager re-signed by someone, or if it doesn't bring more attention to Mahabali.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll see them in wrestling again. Listen, TNA is such in a terrible place right now. If you were to tell me that TNA was planning on running Hager versus Shira at Lockdown, I'd be morbidly curious about it. Honestly, there'd be some interest there for
yeah,
me.
yeah. I don't know if either one of them has interest in coming back, but that like you said, that would be pretty good, and I think Swagger have a far more productive time in between the ropes than obviously he did here. So,
Yeah. Although you could end the match with Shira with hometown man slapping Hager so hard he falls down,
oh
and
man.
Shira gets the win. That'd be hilarious. That'd be hilarious. All right, that'll take us to the end of the show. Marcus, any final thoughts on this week's show?
Oh, that's all over for me. We probably I guess me and Chad eventually because he talked about kind of how to finishing out things at his job this week and I'll probably get it finished by the weekend as well. We'll try to come back and see how they close things. Like I said, at this point, I'm only going by Chad's encyclopedic knowledge of TNA because we've either talked about all this stuff over the years, he's revealed more than obviously they've been willing to reveal anything, or it's just kind of one of those things where you kind of just got to get caught up, like Chad said, if you just jumped on the wrestling train last 4 or 5 years. But we'll see how they close things. Like I said, I think that this was more so to highlight Jarrett, who he is, his importance in the business, particularly with TNA, and kind of have him coming out looking more favorably at the end of it all. Uh, so yeah, we'll see how that closes out. But a hell of a 3-part opener for the season of Dark Side of the Ring. I say that.
Should be interesting, especially because like 2 or 3 years ago there was talks about them ending the show, and I think
Yeah,
this is their biggest 3 episodes yet. Like I said, it's not a bad run. These 3 episodes
yeah,
I don't think are lies by any means. The people talking definitely believe what they're saying, but it's just from one side of the conversation. That being said, none of it's also new information. It's stuff
yeah,
that we've all heard about for 15, 16, 17 years now. But it's
yeah,
you still got to teach World War II, right? You still got to teach the
yeah.
Great Depression. You still got to teach history. And as long as people
Exactly.
understand that this is a educational experience and not a news information experience, I think it'll be fine. But I am curious to see how episode 3 goes because I think it's going to focus more on Hogan,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if there's more stuff there that I don't know about. But then again, I was still tuned in with the Hogan era, so I know about all the bullshit that
Exactly.
was happening there.
Exactly. Didn't know how close he was with Owen. Jeff was with Owen. That was new to me. I did not know it, and to the point where he literally had to follow his match. So that was well, not a match, but his accident. So that was crazy. That was another deep emotional blow even before he lost his wife. So that was a lot too.
Kurt's gone through a lot. He has. He really has.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up there, though. If there's anything else left to talk about with Dark Side of the Ring, we'll do so next week. Be sure to follow us on the website, realnerdcorp.com, realnerdcrp.com. I'm still working on those mid-year report cards. Give me some time. They are intensive. Plus, I have other work to do as well. Twitter, NERDCRP, Instagram, well, I'm not there. YouTube and Twitter. Nope, YouTube and Twitch. There we go. Wrestling Underground. Go check us out there. Just search Wrestling Underground on YouTube and Twitch. One of those is right. Marcus, you're on Twitter at Paradox Kid, PARADOXKID.
That is me.
You can also find him on his other podcast, The True Penny Show, TRUEPENNYSHOW. What are you guys talking about this week on the pod?
Yeah, man. We got a chance to return to our Gleat beat after a long time away. A bit of an excursion we had from Gleat because obviously they moved to a more paid system, and we decided to go to Russell University, get more bang for the buck, and got a lot of shows out of that. But they've returned with some big shows up on the YouTube channel. We reviewed their fifth anniversary show. That was a big show for them, so we looked at that. Then also talking about uh, the 36th installment of the G1 night one. So yeah, go check all that good stuff out.
That's also on their podcast and on the Twitter account, which you can find on the True Penny Show, TRUEPENNYSHOW. Find them on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter, Chad Nerdcorp, CHDNERDCRP, and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at CHDSPHOTOHUT. You can find us once again on the website, realnerdcorp.com, REALNERDCRP.com. That's realnerdcorp.com. Check us out there. We'll have those mid-year report cards up to you guys soon. For Marcus, I'm Chad. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, take us home.
Good night, me.